collected less than $1 million. I listened to the president last night, 2 nights ago, pardon me, as he said enough is enough. This most recent death in the north end of Taylor, that's 3 deaths in the north end of Taylor in the last 10 months, according to my count. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I believe that could be. I think it's time that we open those stations. I'm willing to present a resolution to you indicating that those stations ought to be opened, and I'm also willing to include in that the EMS be brought back into the city, that we use city vehicles. I asked the chief what we would have to do to get those ambulances serviceable. He said that it would take, I think he said about $600 worth of batteries. I'm willing to stand good for that $600 worth of batteries. Enough is enough. We can't have any more people dying in this town. We can't have any more total disaster type fires. It's time for us to settle this thing up. Whatever is causing us not to have those stations open ought to be put aside, and they ought to be opened as immediately as possible. And I'm not talking about waiting until we figure out who's gonna pay for the utility bills and so forth. It's life and death. It's life and death for people who live further away from the fire station that's operating than I do. It's life and death for people in the north end of Taylor, where I grew up, and virtually every house was stick built.
Is that a fair statement for someone that lives further away from Station 2 than someone that lives closer to it? I mean, somebody's always gonna live further away from the station.
Jeff, how many angels sit on the head of a pin? I don't care about that.
Well,
All I know, what I know is, if that if fire station 2 had been open, those folks in the trailer may not have had a chance, but if that had been a house on the north side of E-course, those folks would have a chance. Coming from the fire station to a trailer is not something you can figure out, but to a house, there's a lot better chance that house would survive coming from fire station 2 than from fire station 1.
The 2 additional trailers would have probably been safe. You're talking 4 people with probably not a lot of insurance.
Yeah, sure.
And
Not a lot of anything.
my house burns down, I've got insurance. As long as my wife and the kids and so forth aren't in there, I got insurance, I don't worry about it. But in those areas, the ones that are furthest from Station 1, they're the ones that pay.
Well, if I may say
I'm
that,
done.
well, if I may add that, it's getting colder and colder. We're gonna have more of the heaters, we're gonna have more of the little fires as people's heat goes out, or either their house is cold, or they, whatever. In the next few months, we're probably gonna be looking at probably more fires than we have in the past, warm weather. Not sure, as what they do in the garage, but, it could be a worrisome time coming up. I think it'd be very beneficial if we had our fire stations open. I have a family member that lives almost Inkster Road in Van Born. So I imagine it would take them longer to get to her house than mine. I live in the middle of town. I'm very fortunate. I live right by the fire station. I have a family member that lives almost to Inkster and Van Born. So I imagine it would take a little longer to get there.
Mayor's right around the corner.
I'm just saying, I'm
I
very.
have a family member that almost lives to Van Born and Pelham.
Okay, there you go.
We
You have
didn't get
another
our
family member
report
that
yet.
lives farther
We
away,
didn't get our
so.
full report on it.
Wouldn't you be more worried about them?
She may not like him.
I'm just saying, it's something that you would think about more. 5 minutes can be, if you do, I'm sure you've researched it, everyone else, if you do it, 5 minutes can be a huge difference in a fire. 5 minutes can mean life or death in a fire. And if it
If we
takes
wanna have
them,
that dialogue, we can have. I mean, there's,
well, there is.
there are other scenarios that can reduce response time as well. And, getting a call at 2:30 at night does not reduce response time. And nobody would have been there in 45 seconds. Would have taken
I would
45
say
seconds
about
from
45
the station to there. but it
Who said
would
45
have
seconds?
taken, it still would have taken them 3 minutes to get up and get in the engine.
45 seconds?
So,
No.
45 seconds drive
Comment,
time.
Mr. Mayor?
Never said, I never said 45-second response time for that.
That you wondered where.
If you go back and read that article, I
Romulus,
said
think you
drive time.
Dearborn Heights were.
right.
You
But
can't
5
rely
minutes
on
makes a huge difference.
Romulus and Dearborn Heights
Yeah,
to fight off.
still would have been under 2 minutes.
Well, my concern related to that wasn't about fighting or fighters, was that you have a situation with those trailers packed on top of each other, where you don't know what any one person has in that trailer, in a shed next to the trailer, from explosives. That incident could have turned from 1 trailer to 6 trailers.
Yes, it could.
And I've only got a report that shows that there were 2 engines on scene. That was my concern. Now, I think, trying to get to it, was that we only had 11 on shift that night, because that might have been our short shift. I don't know if that's, so we had 4 and 5 on the engine staffing. So if we only got 2 engines, the question comes down to, why aren't we only got 2 engines in service. So we're working on all of the other reporting mechanisms to make sure dispatchers know how many engines are in service at any given time, to whether or not we need to pull in a mutual aid. There was no reason why if mutual aid's there for that purpose and why we pay into it. If we need somebody, we should have activated them, just in case, at least so they'd been around, we could have canceled them. It costs us nothing to do that.
I
We've
agree.
been very lucky in,
That's why I said I agree with you 100%.
the scenario of a windy day in the north or south end, when you've got mostly homes with, most of them with bad wiring that hasn't been inspected in decades and decades. And you get a major fire and wind to spread it like they did in Detroit a few years ago, and they lost a couple of city blocks.
Right. Well, I just ran into one of our retired firefighters, said the same thing. He says, we were master planned for 5 stations, we're still too short. So not only, does he feel we need to open the stations, we need our other 2 stations still, from their standpoint. But, so, I just want to again, remind you, $1 million of revenue, whether it's $1 million, whether it's $1.5 million that was budgeted the last time we had it, it is a $700,000 fixed cost for transport. I did all the math, I presented that when we were negotiating with the union about doing it, about subtracting that out. The fuel costs that we
Even with the
pulled
safer
out,
grant that's
they
paying
can't
the
pay for
salary?
any of that stuff.
No,
It's a
he's saying
fixed
it's-
cost.
he's saying if the
That's
safer
$100,000 for billing issues, that's, fuel
Right.
costs, all of the costs related, all of the supplies that we bought for ALA, all of that stuff was done.
But weren't you
It's a
counting
fixed
payroll at
cost.
the time?
No, that's a $700,000 fixed cost, not personnel.
And all right, 700,000 is what it would cost us, and what is it we bring in at our best year?
1.3, our best year,
So we,
$600,000 revenue.
600,000 would help.
Would you send me that, a copy of that sheet, that $700,000 sheet?
But Mayor, 600,000 would be only 400,000 short from our million. If we could bring in something, be better than
But
nothing.
You're forgetting, you're saying that we added $3 million.
No,
We
no.
still have $5 million in deficit we haven't paid off yet.
No, you just
So it's-
said,
it's
you guys said we
8
made
million.
$1 billion a year is what I
Right,
thought
we
this would be.
extended 3.
For the new $3 million.
Right, so I'm saying $1 million a year, but we could take off 600,000 of that million a year if we bring in $600,000 more money. I think if I had it right. Even if we only made 600,000, that's better than no thousand.
We
And
talked
I
about,
thought, if we're looking to make any little bit of money or, to survive, I would
We
think
talked about-
anyway.
many cost-saving, ideas that we brought to council, in the last 6 months or last year, for the past 3 years. And this council continually chooses not to do those. So, for
Give me a couple of
instance,
examples.
oh, absolutely, thank you for asking me.
I-
But we didn't like our bills properly.
Yeah, well, how
Well,
about giving up our
how about-
health care? Let's start with that.
How about you give up your, whatever you want.
I'll give up
leave me
whatever you give
alone.
up, Jake, and let's
You're
do it.
always on me about it, I gotta go.
Okay.
You
Well,
go ahead and
no,
give
you
your
don't wanna
ideas.
talk about yourself.
I don't wanna talk about me.
Right, of
Because you're
course
always
not.
talking about me.
No, it's not just you,
Leave
Jake,
me alone,
everybody.
Jill.
Everybody. We talked about the
Have a nice
retirement
evening.
money, the
I'll be at another
retirement
meeting.
thing said $188,000 a year, if we cut that off. What did you have to say about that, John? Remember?
I'm a guy who's worked for this city for 20 years.
What,
Never
four
alone.
years full-time, John,
Never
4
alone.
years full-time.